I caught my picture-perfect sister with my boyfriend a week before her wedding. I thought exposing her would ruin everything, but it turns out my mom already knew and encouraged her. I told her fiancé anyway, and at the altar, he exposed them both into the microphone, tore up the prenup, and walked out while the whole church watched. I didn't win them back. I walked away. And I never went back. Growing up in Asheville, North Carolina, I always knew I was the odd one out in my family. Not in the way that I didn't belong, but in the way that no matter how hard I tried, I never quite fit the picture my mother had in her mind of the perfect daughter. That spot had already been taken by my younger sister Isabel. Isabel is 28. She's a soft-voiced, honey-haired interior designer with a curated Instagram feed full of lavender lattes, perfectly posed photos in linen dresses, and quotes about balance and grace. People fall in love with her within minutes. She has that glow, the kind of charm that makes strangers want to do her favors, and waiters slip her extra dessert. My mom Diane is her #1 fan. If Isabel so much as sneezed, my mom would ask if it was allergies or if she needed to see someone. If I got promoted at work, I'd get a half-hearted "that's nice," then a swift pivot to whatever Isabel was doing that week. I'm 31, work in corporate communications for a regional healthcare group, and live in a modest 2-bedroom townhouse not far from downtown. I've always been more reserved, more structured. I read contracts for fun. I love spreadsheets. I can hold my own in a room full of executives, but fumble when someone asks me to describe myself on a dating profile. My mom calls me intense. That's her polite way of saying I'm not like Isabel. Isabel's wedding is in 6 weeks. The Clark household is in full-on bridal mode. Color palettes, catering, tastings, linen samples. Gavin, her fiancé, is a 35-year-old lawyer who works in real estate law. Clean-cut, polite, from a family with a vacation home in the Keys. My mom is over the moon. Finally, Isabel is getting married, and to a man who checks every box. I'm currently dating Logan Bennett. He's 33, works in product development for a tech startup out of Raleigh, and is probably the most patient man I've ever known. We've been together for almost 2 years, and while things haven't been perfect, we've built something stable, grounded. He doesn't always say the right things, but he shows up. That used to be enough. Last weekend, we had dinner at my parents' place. Nothing out of the ordinary at first. My dad grilled salmon on the patio. My mom fussed over the table settings. Gavin talked about some new zoning law he was dealing with. And Isabel, well, she was being Isabel. She wore a white sundress that somehow made her look both casual and ethereal. She floated between conversations, laughed at everything, complimented everyone. But what stuck with me was the way she kept looking at Logan. Not just casual glances. It was more deliberate, like her gaze lingered just a second too long. When he made a joke about my mom's overcooked asparagus, Isabel laughed like he had delivered a stand-up routine. She even touched his arm lightly when she walked past him to refill her wine. It was subtle, but I noticed. I told myself not to overthink it. Isabel is naturally flirty. She's affectionate. Maybe it was just her being excited about the wedding and trying to bond with Logan, who, to be fair, she hasn't spent that much time with. Maybe I was reading too much into things, because deep down I've always felt like I'm competing in a race I didn't sign up for. One where Isabel gets the cheers and I get the polite nods. After dinner, as we were saying goodbye, Isabel hugged Logan a little longer than necessary. Her hand stayed on his back as she smiled up at him. He seemed caught off guard but smiled back politely. When it was my turn to hug her, she gave me that same sweet smile. She always does, the one that says everything is fine, everything is perfect. But it didn't feel fine. That night, lying in bed next to Logan, I couldn't shake the feeling. He was scrolling on his phone, half listening as I tried to talk through what I'd noticed. "Do you think Isabel was acting weird tonight?" I asked quietly. He looked up, puzzled. "Weird how? I don't know," I said. "Just overly affectionate. Like the way she laughed at everything you said and how she kept touching your arm." He blinked, then shrugged. "I think you're overthinking it. She's just excited. It's her wedding, Maddie. She's always been like that." I nodded, trying to convince myself he was right. But something about the way he dismissed it made my stomach twist. I stared at the ceiling long after he fell asleep, wondering why I felt like I was standing outside a house I thought was mine, watching someone else take the keys. The next morning, I tried to let it go. I poured myself into work, joined meetings, wrote press releases, answered emails. But every time my phone buzzed and I saw a message in the family group chat, my mind would go back to the way Isabel looked at Logan. The way my mother beamed at her. The way I suddenly felt like an outsider in my own story. I didn't have proof of anything, just a feeling. A slow creeping sense that something wasn't quite right. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure anyone would believe me even if I did. The only person I felt I could talk to without being judged was Emily. She'd been my best friend since college, the kind of person who remembered tiny details from conversations years ago and never hesitated to call me out if I was spiraling. When I called her the next afternoon and asked if we could meet for coffee, she said she'd be there in 20. We sat across from each other in our usual booth at Brewhouse, a small cafe tucked away on a quiet street near Pack Square. I stirred my iced latte with the wooden straw, watching the ice clink against the sides, trying to find the right words. Emily waited, patient but perceptive. "I think Isabel is flirting with Logan," I finally said, not looking up. She didn't respond right away. When I did glance up, I saw her eyebrows pull together. Flirting? How? I explained the dinner, the way she looked at him, the arm touches, the laugh that went on a little too long. Emily listened closely, nodding every so often. Then she leaned back and exhaled. "You know, this kind of reminds me of what happened with Jeremy." My stomach tightened. I hadn't thought about that in a while. "You really think so?" I asked. She gave me a look. "Maddie, he ghosted you 2 weeks after that weekend at your parents' place. Remember? The one where Isabel suddenly got super friendly and offered to help him with his grad school applications." I nodded slowly. Jeremy had been distant after that. I never got closure, just silence. Back then, I told myself it was just bad timing. But now, Emily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Look, I'm not saying she's doing it on purpose. But this isn't the first time someone close to you suddenly shifts when Isabel gets too close." I chewed the inside of my cheek. I didn't want to think that my own sister, would do something like that again. But deep down I knew Emily had a point. Later that week, we had a small gathering at the venue where Isabel and Gavin would be getting married. It was meant to be a light afternoon to choose ceremony music with the band they'd hired. Just immediate family: Gavin, Isabel, and apparently Logan too. We arrived at the same time, and as we walked in, Isabel beamed and looped her arm through Logan's like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Logan, thank God you're here," she said. "Gavin couldn't make it last minute, so I'm stuck choosing all this alone." I blinked. "Wait, Gavin's not coming," Isabel shrugged. "Something about a last-minute meeting at his firm." "It's fine. I trust Logan's ear anyway." She said it so breezily, like Logan's opinion meant more than her fiancé's. Logan chuckled awkwardly but didn't pull his arm away. Inside the hall, while the musicians played samples, Isabel stood shoulder to shoulder with Logan, occasionally leaning in to whisper something in his ear. He laughed once, then looked over at me as if remembering I was there. I gave him a tight smile and focused on the cello player trying out Canon in D. Afterwards, Isabel suggested trying the wedding cake samples since we were all there anyway. She looked directly at Logan. "You have good taste. Want to come with me to Sugarfinch? Gavin's not into sweets." I opened my mouth about to remind her that I too existed, but Logan beat me to it. "Actually, we have dinner plans with my sister tonight, right, Maddie?" I nodded, but I could tell he hesitated. Just for a second. Isabel waved her hand. "No worries. Another time then." She smiled, but there was something clipped behind it. I felt a chill despite the summer air. That night after dinner, I couldn't hold it in any longer. We were on the couch, Logan watching highlights from a soccer game, me sitting stiffly next to him. "Do you think Isabel is acting a little inappropriate around you?" He turned to look at me, confused. "What do you mean?" I kept my tone as even as I could. "The way she holds your arm. Laughs at everything. Invites you to do things Gavin should be doing. It just feels off." Logan ran a hand through his hair and sighed. "Maddie, you're being weird about this. She's just trying to include me. I'm part of the family now, sort of. Isn't that what you wanted?" I shook my head. There's a difference between being friendly and being flirty. She didn't even mention Gavin today. And you didn't exactly shut her down either. He frowned. I'm not flirting back if that's what you're accusing me of. I'm trying to be nice. If I tell her to back off, it becomes a thing. I looked at him, feeling a sharp pang of something I couldn't name. Disappointment, maybe. Or fear. So I'm imagining it. He hesitated, then said carefully, I think you're reading too much into it. Isabel's always been like that. You know that. I turned away, staring at the dark window. My own reflection stared back at me, expression unreadable. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was reading into it. Or maybe I'd been taught too many times that raising a concern only led to being told I was dramatic. But part of me knew. I knew how it felt to see someone circling your life, slowly inserting themselves where they didn't belong. And I knew it wasn't just in my head. The Clark family barbecue was supposed to be casual. Just close relatives, some burgers, beer, and an excuse for Isabel to show off her latest wedding plans, while Mom floated around like the host of a Garden magazine feature. Dad manned the grill, as always, standing behind a wall of smoke that smelled like charcoal and rosemary. Emily had warned me not to overanalyze, to go in with a clear mind, but I hadn't made it 5 minutes before my stomach began to tighten. Logan and I arrived together. He wore one of those fitted polo shirts that Isabel always complimented. The second we walked through the gate, she zeroed in on him with a wide smile. You made it finally. I thought you were going to bail. She said it directly to Logan, ignoring me completely. He laughed. You know I can't pass up your dad's grilled ribs. She touched his arm lightly. Oh, come on. We both know it's not the ribs that bring you here. Her hand stayed just a beat too long on his sleeve before she turned to greet someone else. I stood there holding a bowl of fruit salad I suddenly wanted to drop into the trash. The rest of the afternoon blurred into a series of moments I couldn't unsee. Isabel planting herself beside Logan at the picnic table, her bare shoulder brushing against his every time she leaned in to speak. Her laughter rising above everyone else's when he told a mediocre story about a product launch gone wrong. Gavin, her fiancé, sat across from them with his phone in hand, answering emails and barely looking up. At one point, as I helped Mom bring out pitchers of lemonade, I heard Isabel call out to Logan. You should totally help me hang those string lights tomorrow. Gavin's not great with heights. She giggled as if that was some kind of cute joke. Logan glanced at me, then said casually, Sure, let me know what time. I didn't say a word. I just carried the tray and pretended I hadn't heard a thing. Later that night, after we got home, I dropped my purse on the kitchen counter and turned to him. So you're helping her hang lights tomorrow? He looked up from his phone, confused. Yeah, she asked. What's the big deal? The big deal is that she has a fiancé. Who was sitting right there, by the way. Logan sighed. You're doing it again. Doing what? Turning nothing into something. Maddie, she asked me to help. It's just lights. I folded my arms. It's not just lights. It's the constant touching, the flirting, the way she talks to you like Gavin doesn't even exist. He looked annoyed now. She's being nice. That's who she is. I stepped closer. And what about you? Do you like the attention? He stared at me, then shook his head. I think you're insecure because it's Isabel. You always have been. His words hit me like a slap. Insecure. You think this is about me being jealous of her? Isn't it? I was so stunned I didn't answer right away. I turned and walked to the living room, needing space. But we weren't done. He followed. Look, I don't want to fight about your sister. I came today for you. You're the one who's making everything into a competition. I laughed, cold and bitter. A competition. That's rich. Before either of us could say more, my mother's voice echoed from the hallway. Are you two seriously arguing right now? I turned to see her standing in the doorway, arms crossed. We're not arguing, I said quickly. You're ruining the entire weekend. Do you have any idea how tense Isabel is with the wedding coming up, and now you're dragging Logan into your drama? My mouth opened, then closed. Mom, I'm not the one. I don't want to hear it, she cut in. Whatever this is, sort it out quietly. This is Isabel's moment. Don't make it about you. Logan looked down at the floor. I stared at her, willing myself not to cry. When she walked off, I felt something collapse inside me. Not just from what she said, but how easily it came to her. No hesitation. No doubt. Just the assumption that I was the problem. We didn't speak the rest of the night. Logan fell asleep early on the couch, claiming he was tired. I lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling again, wondering when I had become a stranger in my own life. I kept replaying Isabel's laugh, the way her hand curled around Logan's elbow, the way my mother's voice had that sharp edge of disappointment it reserved just for me. I had never felt more alone. And more certain that I was the only one willing to call things what they really were. The air in my apartment that morning felt thick, like something unspoken had settled into the walls overnight. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't eat, couldn't bring myself to even answer texts from Emily. I kept replaying every second from the barbecue, the looks, the touches, the silence from Logan when I needed him to stand up, the sharpness in my mother's voice. Every piece pointed to something I didn't want to admit. I wasn't just overreacting. I was being deliberately ignored. Later that afternoon, I got a call from my mom letting me know that Aunt Valerie had arrived early from Charlotte. I didn't even remember she was coming. She was staying in the guest room for a few days to help with wedding prep. Despite my storm of emotions, I'd always liked Valerie. She was different from my mother, quieter, thoughtful, less focused on appearances. Still, I debated whether I should even show up for dinner that night. But the idea of not showing would have given Isabel another opportunity to whisper that I was dramatic or unstable or jealous. So I showed up. Dinner was pot roast and garlic mashed potatoes, and I barely tasted any of it. I sat next to Valerie at the long table on the patio opposite from Logan and Isabel, who had naturally arranged themselves side by side again. Isabel wore a floaty pale blue dress, no doubt curated to look effortless. Every time Logan said something, she'd toss her head back laughing. My mother didn't blink at it. My dad, as usual, stayed quiet and refilled drinks. Gavin wasn't there. Apparently he had a meeting in Atlanta. Valerie didn't say much during the meal, but I could feel her watching. Her eyes followed the same little details mine did: Isabel's casual shoulder bumps, the way her fingers grazed Logan's wrist when she passed him a napkin. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was burning. After dinner, while everyone else gathered in the living room to debate wedding favors, Valerie lingered behind in the kitchen with me as I cleared dishes. The room was quiet, except for the soft clinking of plates in the sink and the distant hum of Isabel's voice floating in from the other room. Valerie was drying a salad bowl when she finally spoke. "Can I ask you something?" I glanced at her. "Sure." She looked directly at me, her tone careful. "Has Isabel always been this forward with your boyfriends?" My hands paused in the soapy water. I stared at the faucet for a moment before replying. "You noticed it too," Valerie nodded slowly. "I've been here 24 hours and I've seen enough to feel uncomfortable. She acts like Logan is hers. And no one in that room seems to think it's odd." A wave of relief washed over me. I wasn't alone. I wasn't imagining it. Someone else saw it. Someone who wasn't clouded by years of favoritism or family delusion. "I've tried to talk to Mom about it," I said quietly. "She shuts me down. Says I'm being sensitive." "That tracks," Valerie murmured. "Your mother's always had blinders when it comes to Isabel." I turned to her, drying my hands. "Valerie, am I crazy, or is something actually happening here?" She gave me a look that was full of something more than just sympathy. It was knowing. And it made me feel for the first time in days like someone was on my side. "You're not crazy. And it's not just this," she said. "Isabel has a pattern." She set down the bowl and leaned against the counter. "Back when she was in college, I gave her a shot to help with a renovation pitch I was working on. A client of mine, an indie bookstore downtown, wanted a redesign. I thought it would be a good experience for Isabel to sit in, maybe shadow a few meetings. What happened? She sent the client her own concept design behind my back. Never ran it by me, never told me. Just used my name, sent it directly to them. The client thought it was a surprise from me. They loved it. But it made me look unprofessional." I frowned. "Did you confront her?" "Of course I did. And she just smiled, said she was trying to be helpful. No apology, no acknowledgement that she overstepped." "Did you tell Mom?" Valerie laughed, but it was bitter. "I did. She said Isabel's young. Let her be creative. She meant no harm. Let her be creative. Let her flirt, let her take, let her lie. Let her be adored. Always. Valerie placed a hand gently on my shoulder. Listen, Maddie. I've watched you put yourself second to keep peace. But you're not wrong here. I see it. Clear as day. And I'm sorry it took me this long to say something. My throat tightened. Thank you, I whispered. That means more than you know. We stood in silence for a few beats, just breathing in the quiet. Then she said, "Do you want my honest advice, please? Document it, all of it. Keep texts. Write down what you see. Not for revenge, but because if this spirals, and I think it will, you'll need to remember that your memory isn't broken. You're not being hysterical, you're seeing clearly." I nodded slowly, overwhelmed but grateful. I felt like someone had just handed me a flashlight in a dark hallway I'd been stumbling through alone. As we finished cleaning, Isabel walked into the kitchen, hair slightly tousled, cheeks flushed from wine. "Oh my God, Valerie, you should help with the centerpieces. You have such good taste." Valerie turned, smiled politely. "I think you've got plenty of help already." The smile Isabel gave in return was tight, almost confused. I stayed quiet, watching their exchange like a spectator at a tennis match. There was something in Isabel's eyes I hadn't seen before. A flicker of wariness. Maybe for the first time she realized she wasn't being applauded from all angles. And maybe for the first time I didn't feel quite so alone. The week leading up to Isabel's wedding was a blur of phone calls, deliveries, fittings, and last-minute changes. Everyone buzzed around her like satellites orbiting a perfect star. I tried to stay out of it as much as I could, showing up when asked, smiling when expected. Valerie had offered to take me out for drinks just to give me an hour of breathing room, and I was tempted, but I didn't want to give my mother any more ammunition to claim I wasn't being supportive. That Friday, I remembered something small but important. During the last barbecue, I'd taken off my necklace, my grandmother's locket, and left it in a small box in the storage shed out back. It was the only thing of hers I still had. I knew I needed to get it before the chaos of the wedding swallowed the house. Everyone was supposed to be out. My mom had told me she and Isabel were spending the afternoon at the spa, and my dad was running errands for the caterer. I figured it was the perfect time to slip in, grab the necklace, and leave unnoticed. I parked at the curb, grabbed my keys from my bag, and walked along the side of the house toward the backyard. The sun was warm but not oppressive, the grass freshly cut. I moved quickly, familiar with every creaky step on the wooden path leading to the shed nestled behind the garden. As I rounded the bend near the lattice-covered corner, I paused. There was movement. I stopped, body going cold. Muffled voices filtered through the air, low, breathy. Then I heard laughter. Soft, close, familiar. I took a step forward, peering through the tall hedges. My eyes narrowed, and that's when I saw them. Logan. Isabel. They were pressed against the side wall of the shed, half shielded by the climbing ivy. Logan's hands were tangled in Isabel's hair. Her legs were wrapped tightly around his waist, her dress bunched at her thighs. One of his hands was under her shirt. Their mouths were locked in a way that left nothing to the imagination. I couldn't breathe. My feet felt cemented to the ground. The air went still, like the earth itself paused to register what was happening. My vision blurred, not with tears, those hadn't even come yet, but with something deeper, heavier. A complete unraveling. My body reacted before my brain did. "What the hell?" My voice cracked, but it was sharp enough to slice through their haze. They broke apart like they'd been electrocuted. Isabel staggered, adjusting her dress. Logan's face turned a ghostly white. His shirt was wrinkled, his expression blank. Maddie. Logan stepped forward, stammering. It's not what you think. Don't." I lifted a hand palm up like I could physically stop the words from reaching me. Isabel's lips trembled. Her hands fluttered at her sides like she didn't know what to do with them. Her voice was already caught in sobs. "Maddie, I'm so sorry. Please, just let me explain." It was, "Stop talking." I couldn't hear it. I wouldn't. I took a step back, then another. My breath was shallow, my hands shaking so hard I thought I might drop my bag. "How long?" I asked, my voice hollow. Neither of them answered. "You've been lying to me this whole time," I said. "You stood in front of our family in my parents' house, and I couldn't finish." Logan tried again. We didn't mean for this to happen. It got complicated. Complicated, I laughed. Or maybe I choked. I'm not sure which. Isabel's tears spilled freely now. Her mascara smudged at the corners. She stepped toward me pleading. Please don't tell Gavin. I froze. The audacity. Of all the things she could say, that was the one she chose. I stared at her, my sister, the girl I shared bunk beds with, the girl I defended in middle school, the one who used to cry when I left for college, and all I saw was a stranger. You're unbelievable. My voice was calm now, eerily calm. You didn't care about me. You didn't even care about him. You just wanted to win. Like always. She opened her mouth again, but I had already turned. I walked across the yard, across the flower beds Mom spent hours maintaining, past the patio where we used to roast marshmallows as kids. Everything around me felt fake. Decorated, designed, nothing was real. I got in my car, locked the doors, and gripped the steering wheel. Then, the tears came. Hot, fast, uncontrollable. I cried until I couldn't see the dashboard. Then I forced myself to breathe. I opened my phone, typed out a single text to Logan. We're done. Don't contact me again. Sent. I blocked his number. I opened Isabel's contact. My finger hovered over it for a moment, then I did nothing. I didn't want to give her even that much power. I started the car and drove. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed to be far away. By the time I hit the highway, the sun was low and gold. I pulled into a gas station an hour later and booked a hotel in Durham, somewhere quiet, somewhere where no one knew me. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't call anyone. I just drove until the familiar landscape disappeared behind me. And when I finally checked into my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, numb. Not from shock, but from the certainty that nothing about my life, my family, my relationship, my history had ever really belonged to me. I didn't sleep that first night in Durham. I lay still in the unfamiliar hotel bed, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, while the room shifted from deep night to pale gray morning. The only thing I managed to consume was half a bottle of water from the minibar. My phone stayed off. I couldn't bear to see what might be waiting on the other side of the silence. Messages from Logan. Or worse, from my mother. Or Isabel. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want excuses. I wanted to disappear. By the second day, I called out of work without giving a reason. Then I stopped checking emails altogether. The thought of composing anything remotely coherent felt impossible. Everything inside me had cracked open. I barely ate. I barely moved. I showered only because I couldn't stand the feeling of my own skin. On the third day, someone knocked. I didn't answer at first. But when the knock came again, followed by a soft voice saying, "It's me, Maddie." Emily, I finally stood up and opened the door. She looked worried, her normally sharp eyes clouded with concern. She didn't say anything. Just stepped inside and set a grocery bag on the table. It was filled with pre-cut fruit granola bars and bottled iced coffee. All the things I normally kept stocked at home. I sat on the edge of the bed. She pulled a chair around and sat across from me. "You look awful," she said gently. I cracked the smallest smile. "Thanks." She reached into her purse and handed me a tissue, which I didn't realize I needed until tears started spilling down my face again. I didn't sob. I was too empty for that. But the tears fell quietly, one after another. I saw Isabel's post. Emily said. Some filtered photo of her holding a bouquet with a caption about how blessed she felt this week. My stomach turned. Of course she did. I haven't told anyone, Emily continued. Not even Jason. It's your story to share. But I needed to see you. I nodded, wiping my face. Thank you for coming. She took a long breath. Valerie called me. I looked up sharply. She said she had something for you. Something that might explain a few things. She's in town. Wants to stop by. I wasn't sure I could handle more revelations. But I nodded again, too tired to argue. An hour later, there was another knock. Valerie stepped inside with a small, worn cardboard box. She sat beside me on the bed, her movements careful. I found this while going through some of the wedding boxes in the garage, she said. It was sealed. Labeled Isabel, senior year. I only opened it because I thought it might be something sentimental. Inside were old notebooks, a few photos, a broken phone charger, and a stack of letters. Valerie handed me one in particular. The envelope had our home address on it and my mother's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. Isabel must have kept them all these years. I slid the letter out slowly. Valerie and Emily stayed quiet as I read. The handwriting was neat, precise. Familiar. Belle darling, you must stay focused. I know Madison is making things difficult right now, but you deserve something good. Don't let her insecurities ruin this for you. Logan is a wonderful man, and if he makes you happy, don't feel guilty. Sometimes things happen for a reason. Don't let your sister's stubbornness keep you from what you're meant to have. Love, Mom. I didn't realize my hands were shaking until Emily reached out and steadied them. She knew, I whispered. Valerie looked at me sadly. She encouraged it. I read it again, then folded the letter and stared at the carpet. The betrayal hit differently. My mother hadn't just ignored the signs. She had actively validated Isabel's actions. She knew Isabel was pursuing Logan. And she didn't just allow it. She gave her permission. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight of being expendable in my own family. It had always been there in small ways. Dismissed concerns. Side-eyed compliments. The way my mother lit up when Isabel entered a room but only smiled politely when I did. But this letter was proof. Cold, undeniable proof. I don't even know what to do with this, I said. My voice was flat. My hands had gone numb. Emily sat forward. You have two choices. Stay silent. Let Gavin marry someone who's lied to him. Let Logan walk away clean. Let Isabel win again. Or you tell the truth. You tell Gavin. Let him make his own decision. At least then you're not carrying it alone. I didn't answer right away. I stared out the window at the empty parking lot, the cars passing in the distance, the world going on like nothing had happened. I don't want to destroy everything, I murmured. I don't want to be the reason it all falls apart. Emily's voice softened. Maddie, it already fell apart. You didn't break it. They did. Valerie nodded in agreement. And Gavin deserves to know who he's really marrying. I closed my eyes. Somewhere inside me something shifted. Not a full decision yet, but a crack in the numbness. They had taken enough from me. Maybe it was time to take something back. I waited until the following morning to call Gavin. My hands trembled as I typed his number, hovering for several minutes before pressing the call button. When he picked up, his voice was calm, polite, but I could hear the edge beneath it. He sounded tired. Hey, it's Madison, I said, already bracing for him to hang up. There was a pause. Then quietly he replied, I was wondering if I'd hear from you. Would you be willing to meet? I asked. Just talk. In person. Please. Another pause. Yeah, okay, name the place. We settled on a small cafe just outside of downtown Raleigh. Neutral territory. Quiet. The kind of place where serious conversations didn't feel quite so crushing. I arrived early, ordered a tea I didn't touch, and watched every car that pulled into the parking lot like it might explode. Gavin walked in 10 minutes later. He looked composed as always. Tailored jacket, calm expression, but there was a tightness in his shoulders I hadn't seen before. When he sat down across from me, I struggled to meet his eyes. Thanks for coming, I said softly. He nodded, folding his hands on the table. You said you wanted to talk. I took a breath and began. I told him everything. From the first moment I noticed Isabel acting strange around Logan to the night I saw them behind the shed. I told him about the letter my mother had written, how she had encouraged Isabel, how Logan had lied to my face again and again. I told him about how everyone around me made me feel like I was the problem until the truth punched me in the chest. I didn't spare the details. He deserved to know. Gavin didn't interrupt. He didn't shift or sigh or frown. He just listened, eyes focused, expression unreadable. When I finally stopped talking, my voice hoarse and dry, he sat still for several long seconds. Then he leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath. I figured something was going on, he said, almost to himself. You did? Yeah. Isabel changed about 4 months ago. got distant. Dismissive. She stopped answering my calls promptly. Avoided making eye contact when we were with her family. And the prenup conversation, he gave a bitter little laugh. She freaked out when I asked for one. Claimed I didn't trust her. But I've seen her spend. She makes decent money but not enough to justify the lifestyle she's been aiming for lately. I swallowed. You asked her for a prenup. Of course I did. I have a firm, a reputation, assets. It's standard. She refused. Flat out. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. Scrolled, then turned the screen toward me. There on the screen were screenshots. Texts between Logan and Isabel. Not sexual but intimate in tone. Flirty. Personal. From 4 months ago. The earliest one time-stamped weeks before the wedding was even announced. I didn't want to believe it then, Gavin said. I thought maybe it was harmless. That maybe I was reading too much into it. But I also don't do blind trust. So I hired a friend of mine, private attorney who does quiet background checks, just in case. He looked me dead in the eye. Turns out your instincts were better than mine. I didn't know what to say. For so long I had been doubting myself, questioning my sanity, afraid of sounding bitter. To hear him confirm it, that he had felt it too, was both validating and heartbreaking. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't be, he said firmly. I should be thanking you for telling me the truth when no one else would. He sat back and ran a hand through his hair. You know, she told me last week that you were acting jealous. That you'd been stirring up drama. That Logan was just being kind and you misread everything. I almost believed her. I stared at the table. That's what she does, I said. She spins the story just enough so that it lands in her favor. So that if you question it, you're the one who looks crazy. He nodded slowly. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, he said. But I'm not walking into a marriage built on lies. I've worked too hard for that. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it all pressing down on us like fog. I don't need anything from you, I finally said. I didn't tell you so you'd take my side. I just didn't want you to walk into something you didn't choose. Gavin looked at me for a long moment, then offered a quiet, almost weary smile. I appreciate that more than you know. He stood and reached for his wallet. Coffee's on me, he said. Then paused. It's time I do the right thing. As he walked out, I felt something in my chest loosen. Not joy, not relief. But something close to peace. I barely made it back to the hotel before my phone began ringing again. This time I recognized the number. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. On the 5th attempt, I picked up, bracing myself. Madison, she said immediately, her voice tight with something that pretended to be concern but sounded more like demand. We need to talk. Now. I stayed silent. I'm downstairs in the lobby. Please come down. I don't want to make a scene. The line went dead. I thought about not going. But I knew her. If I didn't come down, she would just keep calling or worse come up. So I grabbed a cardigan, pulled it over the same jeans I'd been wearing for 2 days, and made my way to the lobby. She was sitting on one of the leather chairs near the fireplace, posture perfect, lips pressed into a line so tight it looked like it hurt. As soon as she saw me, she stood. You look awful, she said. I didn't answer. We moved to a quieter corner near the breakfast buffet that was long since cleared. She folded her hands in front of her like she was about to deliver a sermon. I'm going to be direct, she said. What you did to your sister is beyond unacceptable. Do you understand the mess you've created? My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. I didn't do anything to her. She did this. Logan did this. I just told the truth. Her eyes narrowed. The truth. You call it truth, but all you've done is throw gasoline on an already tense week. Gavin walked out. The rehearsal dinner is cancelled. Isabel's a wreck, and your father hasn't said a word since yesterday. And you vanish without even thinking about how this affects the rest of us. So now I'm the villain. Madison, please, she said, sharply dropping her voice. This family has always handled things privately. Quietly. You going to Gavin, that was betrayal. Betrayal, I repeated. You want to talk about betrayal? You wrote her a letter. You encouraged her to go after my boyfriend. You gave her permission to break my heart. She blinked, caught off guard. For the first time, something faltered in her expression. That letter was from a complicated time, she said. You and Logan were drifting. I thought maybe Isabel finally had someone who saw her. You thought she deserved him more than I did. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. She straightened her shoulders, regaining control. The fact remains you aired our dirty laundry outside the family. Now we're all humiliated. The guests are asking questions. Gavin's parents are furious. We are 2 days away from a wedding and you've destroyed it. I stared at her, really looked at her. The pearl earrings. The pressed blazer. The calm fury behind every word. She wasn't mourning what Isabel had done. She was mourning the image. The perfection. The reputation. You're asking me to apologize. She didn't hesitate. Yes. For the sake of the family. To help Isabel move forward. You can say you were confused, emotional. Just smooth it over enough so she can salvage the day. I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. I'm not saving her from the consequences of her own actions. She leaned forward. Madison, if you don't make this right, I don't know how we come back from this. I stood. I think that's already been decided. As I turned to walk away, I nearly collided with Valerie. She must have arrived during the argument. Her expression was unreadable as she looked between me and my mother. What's going on here? I answered before my mother could. She wants me to apologize. To fix the mess Isabel made so no one has to be uncomfortable. Valerie's eyes darkened. She turned to my mother. Diane, are you serious? My mother's voice rose sharp and brittle. Don't you start. You've been feeding Madison nonsense for days, stirring the pot like always. You never could leave well enough alone. Valerie's voice was calm, low. What you call nonsense, I call truth. And maybe if someone had told it to Isabel earlier, we wouldn't be here. I looked at both of them, heart pounding. Enough. They fell silent. I'm done, I said. With all of this. With pretending like I don't see what's right in front of me. With being the problem just because I refuse to be silent. Madison, my mother started. I took a step back. From this moment forward, I'm not part of this family. Not like this. I turned and walked out, my legs steady beneath me even as everything inside me trembled. By the time I got back to my room, Emily was packing a small suitcase. She looked up and didn't ask questions. Boston's still open, she said. You can crash at my place as long as you need. I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. Let's go. We packed up that same night. Emily booked 2 one-way tickets to Boston and helped me load my suitcase into the back of her car. I didn't look back as we pulled onto the highway. The city lights of Asheville blurred behind us, growing smaller with each passing mile until they finally disappeared completely. I slept for most of the drive, lulled by exhaustion and the soft hum of the road. When I woke up, we were crossing into Massachusetts. The world outside looked different. New. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I had to brace myself. We arrived at Emily's apartment just before dawn. She lived in a cozy 3rd-floor walk-up in Jamaica Plain, full of light and old hardwood floors. She gave me her guest room without hesitation and made a pot of coffee while I stood by the window watching the sun climb through the buildings like it had never stopped rising. The next few days moved slowly. I walked. I read. I sat in parks and tried to piece together what healing was supposed to look like. Emily worked from home and kept a gentle distance, but I could always sense her presence nearby, a steady, quiet comfort. I thought I was ready to move forward. Then Sunday arrived. The wedding day. I tried not to think about it, but by late morning the images crept into my head. The church, the flowers. My mother's sharp instructions. Isabel in her custom gown, all lace and illusion neckline. Gavin standing at the altar. The organ playing. The guests waiting. It was happening right then while I sat cross-legged on Emily's couch in leggings and an oversized sweater, trying to distract myself with an old crossword. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A name I hadn't seen in years lit up the screen. Megan Yates. She was our cousin from my dad's side, not close, not dramatic, and definitely not someone who called without reason. I answered. Maddie, her voice was breathless. Yeah. I sat up. What's going on? I just walked out of the church. You won't believe what happened. My heart leapt. Tell me. She took a moment to catch her breath, then began. It all looked normal at first. Isabel walked down the aisle with your dad. The church was beautiful. Packed. White roses everywhere, everyone dressed to the nines. Gavin looked calm, focused, but quiet. There was something in his expression, Maddie. Like he was already somewhere else. I waited frozen. Then it got to the vows. The priest asked Gavin the usual question. Do you take this woman? And Gavin didn't answer right away. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I gripped the phone tighter. He said, and I swear I'm quoting this exactly, he said, I cannot marry someone who betrayed her own sister for her own selfish satisfaction. Just like that. Into the microphone. Loud enough for everyone to hear. The whole place went dead silent. Even the priest looked stunned. I pressed my hand over my mouth. He went on, Megan said. He said he had suspected things for months. That Isabel lied to him, that she refused to sign the prenup not because she was hurt but because she had something to hide. And then he pulled out the prenup. Held it up. Said, this was never about money. It was about trust. And you failed that before the wedding even began. My chest tightened. What did Isabel do? She broke down, full on sobbing. Gasping for air. Your mom tried to stand up but she looked like she couldn't believe it. And then Gavin looked around at everyone, folded the prenup back into his coat, and said, I will not give my name to someone who lies to the people closest to her. He walked straight down the aisle, no music, no pause. Just left. People were whispering, some stood up, others didn't know what to do. I think half the guests still don't even understand what happened. Megan paused, then added quietly. They know now, Maddie. Even if no one says it, they know. About Isabel. About Logan. About all of it. I sat in stunned silence, staring at the blank television screen across the room. Thank you, I finally said. You deserve to know, Megan replied. And for what it's worth, I think he did the right thing. We hung up after that. I leaned back on the couch, my body suddenly heavy. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel proud. But I did feel something solid. Like truth had finally found its way to the surface, no longer hidden under layers of pretense. In that church in Asheville, the fantasy had cracked open in front of everyone. And this time I hadn't been the one blamed. The morning after the wedding, Boston was gray and heavy with low clouds. I sat by Emily's kitchen window sipping coffee. I didn't really want watching a neighbor struggle to parallel park for the third time. I kept expecting to feel something stronger, satisfaction, revenge, maybe even triumph, but there was only stillness. A strange echoing quiet inside me. My phone stayed face down on the table until mid-morning. When I finally turned it over, I found a flood of messages waiting, some from unknown numbers, others from people I hadn't heard from in months. I ignored them all. Valerie's name was the only one that didn't make my stomach tighten. I opened her text. He walked out with his head high. That's what they'll remember. You didn't lose yourself in their game. Call me when you're ready. I stared at the message for a long time before placing the phone back down. I wasn't ready to call anyone. Not yet. Not even her. Emily returned from the grocery store carrying a tote full of soup cans and herbal tea and quietly put everything away without asking how I was. That was the best kind of grace. No demands, no expectations, just the comfort of someone who understood that healing had no script. In the afternoon, while she was folding laundry in the living room, my phone buzzed again. A new message. This time from Isabel. It began with my name written formally, like she didn't quite know how to address me anymore. Then came the paragraphs, 5 of them. Long winding sentences about confusion, regret, pain, and some form of self-awareness she had only apparently discovered after being left at the altar. She wrote that she never intended to hurt me. That she hadn't understood what she was doing. That Logan had confused her. That she had been lost, jealous, lonely. That she missed me. I read every word once slowly, then again faster, waiting for something, anything to crack inside me. But all I felt was numb. I didn't reply. That evening, the voicemails started. The first came from a blocked number, but I recognized Logan's voice instantly. It was low, pleading. He said he didn't know how things had spiraled. He said he never stopped caring about me, that he had made a mistake, that he didn't expect me to forgive him, but he hoped I would understand. He left another message 2 hours later, and then another at midnight. By the next morning, there were 6. All variations of the same empty desperation. I deleted each one without listening past the first sentence. Whatever clarity he had come to now was meaningless. He had already made his choice. He just hadn't expected to lose the safety net that always came with being the good guy. Later that day, Megan sent a short update. Your mom's been calling everyone saying Gavin was manipulated. She says the wedding was sabotaged by outsiders and rumors. I didn't even feel angry reading that. Just tired. Valerie called me in the early evening. This time I answered. Hi, I said softly. Hi, sweetheart, she replied, her voice warm and grounded. I just wanted to check in. I waited. Things are difficult back home, she said carefully. Your mother's been on the phone with half the church board trying to explain what happened, but the damage is done. People talk, and people remember. I could imagine it. My mother pacing the house, pearl necklace perfectly arranged, spinning a version of the story where she was blindsided by a cruel twist. Where she was the victim of betrayal, not the architect of the silence that allowed it. And your dad, I asked. Still hasn't said a word, Valerie replied. Just sits at the kitchen table drinking tea, listening to her rant. You know how he is. Yes, I did. His silence had always been his signature. Not cruelty. Not support. Just absence. Just space where a father's comfort should have been. And now that silence was being used as insulation, just like always. She paused, then added. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. You broke the pattern. That takes guts. Thank you, I whispered. After the call, I went for a walk along the Charles River. It was early evening, and the breeze carried the scent of water and faint cigarette smoke from nearby joggers. I watched the ripples move across the surface, steady and slow. I breathed in deeply, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel the weight of guilt or confusion sitting on my chest. I wasn't healed. Not yet, but I was lighter. That night, I sat in Emily's living room, legs tucked under me, a blanket over my shoulders, and wrote a single sentence in my notebook. I am not responsible for the people who chose to hurt me. I read it out loud softly like a prayer. And then I closed the book. Because I knew there was more to write. But not tonight. A full year later, I stood at the window of my apartment in Cambridge, watching the first snow of the season fall gently onto the street below. I had grown to love winter in Massachusetts, the quiet it brought, the way it blanketed everything in stillness and light. Boston had become home in a way I never expected. I had taken a job at a small internal communications agency just outside the city. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was meaningful. We helped companies build culture from the inside through newsletters, leadership messages, and employee storytelling. I loved it more than I thought I would. There was a rhythm to the work, a calmness. My team was kind, thoughtful, full of people who respected boundaries and didn't expect you to smile through discomfort. My manager Rachel once pulled me aside after a pitch meeting and said, I can tell you've been through some things. But you lead with clarity. You don't waste words. That stuck with me. Outside of work, I wrote. At first just for myself in private. But eventually I started a blog. I didn't advertise it. Just posted the link once in a small online group for women recovering from emotionally toxic relationships. Then somehow quietly it spread. Posts about gaslighting, manipulation, familial shame. About what it meant to speak truth when everyone around you insisted on silence. Within 6 months, the blog had over 5,000 subscribers. Most of them women. Most of them writing to me with their own stories, quiet heartbreaks, betrayals by sisters, mothers, partners. One woman from Oregon wrote, reading your story felt like I was sitting across from someone who finally understood. That was the best part. Not the numbers, not the attention, but the feeling that all the pain I had lived through hadn't been for nothing. Emily had been my constant through it all. She and I settled into a rhythm. She never pushed me to forgive or forget, just offered support on the days when I needed it and space on the days I didn't. Around February, I learned that Isabel had filed for divorce. Megan sent the update in a brief email. 3 months after the wedding disaster, Isabel and Logan had tried to make it work. They moved into a condo near our parents' house. But, according to Megan, it unraveled quickly. Isabel accused Logan of emotional distance. Logan apparently had a tendency to disappear for hours without explanation. Megan wrote, "Guess they found out betrayal doesn't build much of a foundation." I didn't respond, but I saved the email. Gavin had moved to Chicago. Started fresh from what I heard through distant acquaintances. He changed law firms, joined a nonprofit division, stopped attending the family holidays. Last I knew, he hadn't spoken to anyone in my family since the day he walked out of the church. Part of me hoped he was thriving. Another part of me knew I would never see him again. And that was okay. My parents didn't contact me for months. I didn't expect them to. I think they were waiting for the dust to settle, for time to rewrite the narrative into something more comfortable for them to hold. Then, in October, a letter arrived. It came in a pale pink envelope, my name written in my mother's elegant script. No return address, no card. Just a single piece of stationery folded in thirds. It read, "Madison, I don't know where to begin. I don't know what to say that won't sound hollow. But I'm sorry. I'm sorry for how things happened. I'm sorry for the distance. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel invisible. I wish I had done things differently. Love, Mom." There was no mention of Isabel. No mention of Logan. No reference to the wedding or to Gavin. Just a vague sort of sorrow wrapped in formality. I held the letter for a long time. Thought about what it meant, whether it was sincere or performative. Whether she was trying to mend something or simply relieve her own guilt. I folded it back up and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer needed her to validate my story. I had found peace without her. Later that week, I posted a new blog entry about apologies. About how sometimes they arrive too late, and that's not always a tragedy. About how healing doesn't require a neatly tied bow at the end. It just requires truth and choice. And the strength to live in alignment with both. That night, I sat on my balcony wrapped in a thick blanket, the wind cold against my cheeks, and looked out over the city lights. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was living my life on my own terms. And that was more than enough. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, a cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox. The handwriting on the front was familiar, looping, and careful. It was from Aunt Margot, my mother's older sister. Inside was a wedding invitation for her youngest daughter, Chloe. The ceremony would be held at a vineyard outside Asheville, a sprawling estate nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The entire Clark family would be there. I held the invitation for a long time, turning it over in my hands. I imagined what it might be like to walk into that space, into that crowd, to sit among relatives who had heard only parts of the story, who would glance at me with polite sympathy or sideways judgment. I could picture my mother's tight-lipped smile, Isabel's practiced grace, my father's silence. There had been no contact since the letter. No follow-up. No invitation to reconnect beyond that pale pink envelope and its vague regrets. I placed the wedding card on my desk and stared at it for a few more minutes before opening my laptop. I typed my response slowly, letting the words form one at a time. "Dear Aunt Margot, thank you so much for thinking of me. I'm truly happy for Chloe and wish her every joy. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend. I've found peace in a life that no longer includes those who once made me feel small. Please give Chloe my warmest wishes. With love, Madison." I sent it without rereading. That evening, I went for a walk through Harvard Square, the air brisk and full of falling leaves. I passed by a bookstore where I'd once done a small reading for my blog's anniversary, then a cafe where Emily and I had met for our weekly brunch. My life had become rooted here. Not in defiance of what I left behind, but in full acceptance of it. There were moments when grief still brushed against me, soft and unexpected. A song that reminded me of a childhood trip to the lake. The smell of my mother's favorite perfume on a passing stranger. But they no longer cut, they drifted in and out like tides. I no longer fought. One afternoon in December, I found myself reorganizing my bookshelf and came across the notebook I had started in the weeks after the wedding. Inside, between pages filled with raw confessions and tentative hope, I found the old letter from my mother. Folded neatly, edges worn. I read it once more. "I'm sorry if I ever made you feel invisible." I closed the letter, folded it back, and tucked it deep into the back of the drawer. Not as a rejection, not as a final word, just as a place where it could stay, no longer weighing on me. By spring, the blog had grown into a small but steady community. I began hosting monthly virtual circles where women from all over the country shared their stories. Stories of being gaslit by partners, of families who chose the easier child, of mothers who refused to see them. And slowly, I started speaking more too. Not just writing, but speaking. Using my voice in ways I once thought were impossible. One evening after a long session, I stood on the balcony of my apartment wrapped in a soft shawl, watching the sun slip behind the rooftops. The light spilled in pink and gold across the skyline, casting long shadows and softening everything it touched. I thought about Isabel. About what might have been if she had made a different choice. I thought about Logan, about the emptiness in his last voicemail. I thought about my mother sitting in her quiet house with her porcelain expectations and her carefully rehearsed silences. And I let them go. I forgave them. Not because they had earned it. Not because they had changed, but because I had. Forgiveness, I had learned, is not a door you open for someone else. It's the one you walk through so you can leave the house of pain behind. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered the words I had never dared say out loud. I forgive you. But I do not forget, and I do not go back. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you've ever been made to feel invisible or questioned your own truth because someone else called it inconvenient, you are not alone. I see you. I believe you. And if you have a story like mine, I hope you'll share it. Follow this channel for more real stories that remind us we're stronger than we think. You're not alone anymore.